Before the headlines, before the funding, before the spotlight, there were builders. We mastered survival. We mastered hustle. But India's next chapter demands more. When resources were scarce, we built with ingenuity. When systems were missing, we built with trust. It demands systems. It demands standards. It demands scale. Not just businesses that run, but businesses that lead. This is the voice of India's builders. This is Beyond Jugaad.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Jugaad. I am Ajit Panikar, and in this podcast, we explore the realities of building and scaling businesses beyond survival mode, moving from instinct and improvisation towards businesses that are structured to grow. Now, today's topic is one of that almost every family business founder and next generation successor will relate to. Must every successor start at the bottom? And many founders proudly say, I started from nothing. I learned nothing. I learned everything the hard way, and my children should do the same. And there is value in that thinking. The next generation needs to understand the shop floor, the customer, the people, the struggles, and importantly, earn the respect of the organization. But here's the question. Do they really need to repeat the founder's journey to become capable leaders? Or should we go beyond this jugaad and create a structured induction? External experiences, rotations across functions, mentors, clear responsibilities, measurable outcomes, and eventually real authority. But perhaps the objective shouldn't be to prepare the next generation to survive the past. It should be to prepare them to lead the future. Now, to explore this, I'm joined with once again by Sarika Sethi, who's a business coach and director at Gemini Power Hydraulics, and Samkit Shah, who's a founder and a management consultant and CEO of Allied Pillars. So today, let's challenge an old assumption. Must every successor really start at the bottom? Or is there a better way to prepare them for the top? So Samkit, I'm going to get started with you. Why do founders want their children to start at the bottom?
So Ajit, I was quite excited for this podcast today because I come from a family business and I have gone through this entire journey of how a succession has happened. And I'm a product of a certain succession, which probably we'll delve deeper as we talk. But Ajit, I have seen, on one side of the spectrum, you have, when we say that founders expect the kids to start right at the bottom. On the other side of the spectrum, I've also seen where founders think or the fathers think that beta ye kal se aapka office hai, just aa jao and then you figure it out. Or they are straight got into the boardroom with a voice saying, nahi, ye mera beta hai, jo bolega wo karna hoga. Now, these are the two end of the spectrum. And I think there is a third way, which many family businesses miss out because they are not aware of a process or a structure. So should we start at the bottom or should we just get them straight in the boardroom? I think there are two spectrums. We need to have something which balances through a process. And I think we need to explore this as we talk today, Ajit.
Yeah, that's true. Sarika, what does it actually mean starting at the bottom? I mean, when you hear that, what does that whole perception create for you? The question
this topic also very closely resonates with us because we also have, as founders, we have our successor, our son joining the business. So as founders, we tend to believe that starting at the bottom, like how we did it, how we struggled is the way to do it. We made every call, we reconciled every book, we were aware of everything, and that's the only way for our children to do it. Now, the question here really is whether that is the place for our children. Because our children are entering a business not where we started it, but what it has become today. Our struggle came from actually no choice. It was no noble cause ke hum gada mazduri karenge or something like that, There was scarcity of capital. There were no systems. There were even no computers in those days and no professional support. So we had to struggle to build our um, organizations, our business. There was no alternative. But today, the scenario is very different. The children are coming in a very different ecosystem. So, expecting our children to manufacture that kind of a struggle, I think really does not serve any purpose other than dramatize the humility of the whole thing.
So, Samkit, from what I hear from both you and Sarika is that, does it make sense now that, as a standard practice you should say that, you work outside and then come to the business? I mean, should that be encouraged? Saying that, listen, I think you should work outside the business and then come.
So I'm a product of that thought process, Ajit, because we used to have a family governance, a document which refers that Samkit or Samkit's wife, my sisters or their husband, if they want to enter the family business, they have to work outside for 2 years and in a position of accountability, which means not that my father's friend will hire me and then put me as a trainer saying, okay, you have lunch with me. No, I have to actually get into a position of an accountability, deliver my results. And after that 2 years, am I eligible to come back in my business? And that too, when I enter my business, I will be interviewed. So it does not mean that I finish the 2 years checkbox and I straight enter the boardroom. And I'm very, very finicky about boardroom because today when I talk to multiple family businesses, the son has just finished studies and he enters our meeting and tries to give some gyan to his grandfather. And I immediately stop him, saying, you will not speak a word. You want to sit, you can sit and absorb, but you will not speak a word until you are. My concern is that he will lose his credibility today. He may speak something brilliant, but the audience is not going to be receptive to it. बेटा तू अब तक पढ़ रहा है, तुझे क्या पता हमारे business का? And I think that's the distinction I have seen, and that's why I have started in that journey of working outside the business as well as working in a non-core business of the family. And I think that also defines, sometimes not just working outside is required, even working in a certain division which is not connected to the core gives you that exposure. Maybe working at the customer side gives you that exposure to be on the opposite side of the table. That management में हम बड़े बड़े decisions लेते हैं, but how does the audience on the other side of the table they perceive it? And I was party to a lot of staff in that company where I worked with, right? And I knew the decisions which the management has also taken. And it would be amazing to see different perspectives. What decision, what intent the decision was taken, and how it was interpreted on the other side of the table. And I think that was a very, very important learning for me. That I may have a great intent, but has it landed right on my people?
Yeah, that's that empathy. I think you learn only when you're on the other side. At the early stages, I think it's a no-brainer, and we all understand, that when you run a business, the empathy quotient has to be very, very high. Otherwise, it's so difficult to be in a leadership position. And
Because
Sarika, this brings me.
our intent, right? People can't understand our intent; they only understand our behavior. And I think
Absolutely.
So I just want to add one thing to this. I'm a firm believer of, you should work outside and then come into the family business. But over the years, I have learned two things. One is that the outside experience only works if two things are there. That the successor comes back to the business with respect for what already exists. And the family business is actually willing to be shaped by what they have learned.
very, very
Either
true.
of those components missing and the plot gets lost. Because outside experience teaches the people what is normal. What is a normal performance, what is the normal expectation conversations, what is the normal cash flow. They learn those things. Most family businesses, when children join directly, they don't know that baseline of how to evaluate and judge. But there is another side which I have noticed is when children work in these big four organizations and large consultancies and then come into the businesses, they start treating their family business with quite contempt. Oh, we don't have proper system. ये भी नहीं है, and वो भी नहीं है, and what rubbish, and dad, these are basic things. And so very soon the veterans start noticing this disconnect, and that can become a problem.
Yes.
So it's valuable as long as the successor comes back humble and with the learning, and on the other side, as long as the family business is willing to absorb and understand what could be the change.
True, so true, absolutely fantastic, man. So Samkit, that brings to the next question. Now, even let's say if, you learn from outside and you come into the family business, you spend 2 years and you come into the business. What's the next step? As a founder, what do I tell them? That listen, just shadow me, just follow me, just see what I'm doing, or should there be a structured development plan? Yeah, should I do a roadmap it out? That this is your next 1.5 years, 2 years plan.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it, or should I just do a shadowing and then figuring it out on your own?
See, Ajit, okay, I've got the experience of 2 years, but that does not make me a natural leader because I have not yet established my credibility in those 2 years. Because my team, my company, my managers have not seen me. I was in another company. So if I come back and I straight get into the boardroom and shadowing my dad and start voicing my opinion, they will listen to me because of my surname. They will listen to me because I'm my dad's son. But what they talk behind me will actually decide whether those things will be implemented or they will just give me a good optics of, no, good point, Samkit, good point, Samkit. So I think the first step, and something which my father, I really respect him. He's not very, very highly educated, but he was very clear what he knows and what he does not know. He knows a business, but he did not know all of this process, and he got an advisor very early on. I'm talking of 2003, 4. We used to have a family business advisor in a diamond industry, which is at that time known as a cottage industry. Like Sarika was saying, the difference of the two. On one side, my dad would be making a cash flow, calling 5 country heads. आज कितना कितना आने वाला है, कितना जाने वाला है, on a paper, and he would assimilate. And I come from an experience where there's a 1-page dashboard every morning on the founder's table of what happened yesterday in the entire company. Now that's the different vision I came up with. So the first step is, while I learned a lot, but my dad and my advisor were very clear, Samkit, you still need to establish your credibility here, which means now they interviewed me for my aptitude. What am I good at? Am I good at internal? Am I good at external aspects of the business? And they gave me a department saying, you are going to be entrusted with Tamil Nadu and Karnataka as the sales market. And I was a sales executive reporting to a regional manager, reporting to a national sales head, who was reporting to my uncle, who was reporting to my dad. And that, I would say today, and that at that time, Ajit, I would be bitching behind. Like, I'm Shah, and how can they put me like this in a executive position? Why do I have to go in a train with a bag full of sample lines? Why can't I take a flight? But today, I tell you, I value that experience the highest in my entire career. The entire thought process has shaped because of starting at that level. So I'm a firm believer of that, Ajit.
Wow, and this brings also to the question from what Sarika was saying earlier. Also, you come from a large consulting firm and start questioning. So, Sarika, I just want to take that from the conversation and what Samkit just said. Can authority in an organization just be inherited, or does credibility have to be earned? That concept of understanding that, I'm sure founders find it very difficult to explain to the successor. How do you actually communicate this whole thing? See, listen, you have the authority already. You're a successor, your authority, but credibility has to be, you have to earn it. What are your thoughts on that? How do you actually go about doing it?
Authority is given the day we sign in a successor. When I say authority, is that the position is there, the title is there. The transfer paper says, okay, a Sethi is joined, and so he's the, the next successor, as we call it. But credibility comes from actions, ownership, responsibility. Uh, we earned our credibility as founders because we built the business. Okay. People who were with us in that journey identify कि okay, this is the person you can rely on. कुछ भी होएगा तो solution मिल जाएगा. Problem है सर के पास जाओ. So we built that credibility while we were busy. But our successors, when they join the business, they are not building the business. Okay, so they cannot do the credibility from that way. So they have to build the credibility by making some difficult decisions which probably the founder will not make. They have to make the fairness that they show towards the veteran employees, how they have the back of the employees. All of this matters to build their credibility. Another very important point, I think, is that we as founders are 50% responsible for the credibility that they build. Because our son makes a decision, and in the boardroom, the father says, "What a stupid decision. I told you not to do this." The successor goes back 2 years because he's completely lost it in front of everyone.
Absolutely.
So, as it is as much a responsibility of the founder as it is of the successor to help him build the credibility in his journey.
So
Awesome.
we can't move on this credibility point without mentioning of Dhritarashtra.
Yes.
Dhritarashtra had Duryodhan and Pandu had Yudhishthir. Now, Dhritarashtra tried to have his credibility, without his credibility, tried to inherit the authority. There's some noise. Yeah. But Yudhishthir actually proved his credibility once he got his Indraprasth successfully running. And you see, when that transition happened, so many of them actually went from Hastinapur to be with Yudhishthir, even when he had nothing. And that's what credibility does, more than just a forced inheritance.
Awesome, man. So here's the other important thing that comes. Okay, now you've got the successor, you've set the rules and put a structure in place. When does the training stop and the successor start actually saying that it's time for you to take the lead? I mean, the founder says, "Abhi tu chala, abhi tu chala." Now we need to change that. So when does that happen? I mean, you can't put this in a timeline. It's like एक साल में 2 साल में खत्म हो गया. There is that sensing that you get that okay, it's time for me to step back. When do you get that feel as a founder?
Ajit, there is a wonderful example of a friend of mine who's asked his son to join his business. And I wish I could show the letter that he has written to his son, which in absolute detail outlines year 1, year 2, year 3, when will you start getting shares? When will this happen? It is such a wonderful, mature document, which I really wish all the founders could see. Because the problem of letting go is, it's not that the successors are not ready, but we as founders, and we've completely experienced it. We use the ready word to hide behind. नहीं, अभी ये project कर, and let's see how that works out. So it is more about my business. What will I do after I let go? Because my value is attached to this business.
Yeah.
He will always want to enter the room with control. So my true belief is that if we can define in any way that from 1 to 3 years, this is what you're expected to do. From 3 to 5 years, this is what you're expected to do. Because unless you allow the person to make mistakes, to make judgments, to make responsible calls, the readiness will never be there.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that also brings, letting go. Samkit, I want your thoughts around this. Should you let the next generation make a mistake? And let me put a perspective to the whole thing. I made enough mistakes when I run the business, all right, when I founded the business. I made mistakes at a very early stage, so I could afford to make a mistake. The organization is much bigger. I given it to the successor. I don't want him to make those stupid mistakes that I made. But if I don't let him make the mistake, will he learn? If he makes the mistake, there is a price to be paid. How do you navigate that? Should we actually let the next generation learn to lead if they don't learn to fail?
I think failure is one of the most important teacher for the next generation, and this is where the senior generation really has to be very mindful that every time they see a successor, see their son or their daughter, and if they combine the business impact and their son and daughter together, they will always have the business as a first priority. And that fear कि business में नुकसान हो गया तो नहीं, we can't afford the business loss, you are wrong. But they fail to detach both of them, saying, okay, here is the business. So I give you my example. I was made a CEO of one of the businesses of our group, which was a smaller part of the group, at the age of 24. Now, I was very brash. I had a lot of ideas. I was thinking everything we were doing in the last 10 years in that particular business was wrong. So I wanted to change the product strategy, the customer segmentation. And I just told dad over a dinner conversation that, Dad, I'm stopping out of 12 products we have. I'm going to stop 10 of them. I want to be master of 2. My dad didn't react. He said, okay, that's a good idea. What would happen to the customers if they want the other 10 products? No, they will go somewhere else. Okay, do you see any other impact? I think no. I think we'll be able to bring in much more depth in the product we will do. I said, okay, try it out. He didn't tell me yes. He didn't tell me no. He didn't advocate. He didn't resist. 6 months down the line, I completely failed because I was started losing customers saying, Samkit, if you're not going to give me the other products, then I'll have to go to the other vendors, which means your share of business also will move there. And I learned the hard way. But at that dinner conversation, if dad tried to explain me, I was not in the mode of getting explained because I had made up my mind that this is the right thing to do. So that's where I think I salute my dad because he let me make multiple failures in that particular tenure of my CEOship. And today, every lesson I can go back and refer as an example of how I failed and how that has taught me what actually is the right thing to do.
Awesome. So, Sarika, that comes to the next question. How much should the next generation be allowed to change? I mean, how much should we allow them to change?
Change the business, you mean, or change
Yeah, but
themselves?
like how Samkit said, right? He came, he had a different idea. He said from 10. Now he was very fortunate that his father had. Not all founders are very fortunate to have that kind of insight
Yeah.
which his father had. So uh, if as a founder, if my son comes in and says that, listen, I want to make this change, how much should I permit? Because I have the feeling that I can't afford to lose these customers very painfully acquired.
So
So to what extent should we let them?
I'll give you an example of somebody that I was coaching. He had his son come into the business. It was an engineering manufacturing business. The father had built a very good customer relationship for 20 years, and he treated it as sacred and did not want that disturbed. So the successor did not touch that. What he did was he diversified and built a separate revenue line. He just slowly kept building upon it. And as it happened, 3 years later, that particular customer, who was a very big customer for this company, had some crisis and they stopped their business with this company. And at that time, because the son had transformed and developed another revenue field, the business survived. And the father was very grateful because the father was not willing to look at any other business, and the son had actually managed to keep the business afloat by thinking differently and transforming the business. And then I had another successor who came into the business with a very high mighty attitude कि office change करो, branding change करो, team change करो, this is rubbish and outdated. What happened? They lost whatever connection they had with the customers, because the customer relationship, it takes time for a new team to build it. The veterans looked at it and were absolutely demotivated with the way he was coming in. So the question here is that the founder and the successor should know the place from where this transformation is coming in. Is it actually coming for the betterment of the organization, or is it coming to fan the ego of the successor? So there is a very big gap between no failure and existential failure. As Indian businesses, we tend to go towards no failure, कि नहीं, तू सीख रहा है अभी, तू ready नहीं है. But unless the responsibility is given to the successor, and if it's not an existential failure, the experience will teach.
Awesome. So this brings us to one big question, and I'd like to go first to you, Samkit, and then to Sarika. So this whole succession, really, is it a next generation problem or a founder letting go problem? So Samkit, I'll go with you and then I'll come to Sarika. Where is that problem?
Audience, for the first 25 minutes, everyone in the audience would have thought that it is for my son, but actually this is for the father. For the senior generation to understand that they cannot expect the same journey which they have gone through for their sons to take over. Because the situation demanded a very different leadership in their tenure in the first 30, 40 years. Today, the business is 200 crores, 500 crores, 1,000 crores. The leadership which is demanded now is very different. And I think the senior generation need to understand that what they did was not wrong, but what is the next generation expected to is very different. They need to bring a leadership which leverages what the company has achieved over the last 30, 40 years. Great customers, great people, great product, great market presence. Now, how do they leverage to multiply this? Rather than saying, you leave this, go and start a new market yourself, because I also started a business and a whole new market myself. Yes, for the learning curve, that's a great idea. But the senior generation need to prepare the next generation to take the business forward for the next 40 years. And that capability building is extremely important.
Awesome. Sarika, what's your thoughts?
I think in most family businesses, by the time the founder is genuinely willing to let go, the successor has been ready for quite some time. And, this gap can really cost a botched succession, if I can say that, because the business loses momentum. The successor can get demotivated. The family relations get fractured. I knew of a founder in his 60s and, who said, my son is not ready yet. And I asked him, कि आप क्या करते हो अभी भी? So he said, मैंने उसको functional responsibility दे दी है, customer relationship दे दिया है, signing authority भी उसके पास है, but strategic decision, major hires ना मैं अभी करता हूँ. He was shocked that a month later, his son came up and said, thanks, Dad, but I'm not working with you. I'm setting up my own business. And today, the business that the son set up is far more successful than the father. And the father has not only lost a successor, the family has lost its connect. So, yes, it is the founder's responsibility to set the successor up for success.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, if you really go through this whole conversation that we've had in the last 30 minutes, it just sums up in very simple forms. The goal of succession should not be to make the next generation to prove that they can survive the past. It's all about, How do we prepare them to lead the future? And that strategy is very much beyond Jugaad. Now, don't throw the successor into the business and hope they learn. Build a system that prepares them to lead it. So that's about it from our episode number 5 of Beyond Jugaad. And we'll see you next month with another interesting topic, uh, which takes us into the series of Beyond Jugaad. So, Samkit and Sarika, thank you very much. Wonderful 30 minutes discussion
Thank you.
today morning. Thanks a
you.
lot. See you guys. Bye.
See you.
Before the headlines, before the funding, before the spotlight, there were builders. We mastered survival. We mastered hustle. But India's next chapter demands more. When resources were scarce, we built with ingenuity. When systems were missing, we built with trust. It demands systems, it demands standards, it demands scale. Not just businesses that run, but businesses that lead. This is the voice of India's builders. This is Beyond Jugaad.